It was just past midnight in a cramped Memphis studio when a pistol cracked the control room glass. Musicians froze, overtones still ringing like alarm bells. Jerry Lee Lewis slid the smoking revolver onto the piano, muttered that timing was finally perfect, and ordered the engineer to roll tape. That single trigger squeeze, never mentioned in official logs, became folklore, whispered whenever a session started drifting toward chaos. Nashville sells romance on vinyl, but behind every sweet chorus lurks a messy, mesmerizing truth. The town's brightest stars could be nightmares to manage. Today, we're dragging 20 legends into the fluorescent light, revealing the feuds, fistfights, and fired-on-the-spot bandmates that turned record deals into minefields. Strap in. Genius is about to collide head-on with havoc, and the sparks will be loud enough to wake the dead. Some stories smell of gunpowder, others of roses wilting in shattered vases. Right now. David Allen Coe swaggered into every studio like a renegade carnival barker, cape swirling, 6-inch knife tucked into one boot. He queued up his self-released record, packed with lyrics so offensive that executives physically recoiled and dared anyone to hit stop. An assistant tried. Coe locked the control room door and declared the tape would keep rolling even if the building burned. Session players were hired under fake names, paid in cash, and warned never to mention unions. When a producer suggested cleaning one ugly slur, Coe carved a fresh obscenity into the console and bragged he'd just added texture to the sound. The track stayed, the studio sent the repair bill, and Coe rode off convinced that outrage was the best street team money could never buy. Billy Joe Shaver powered his nights on Baptist zeal and back alley adrenaline. During a 2007 bar scuffle, he planted a bullet in a man's cheek, asked the patron, "Where do you want it next?" and strolled back inside to finish his set. Court cameras later showed him quoting scripture while jurors blinked, unsure whether to gasp or buy tickets. On tour, he carried one guitar, one shirt, and a tackle box of pills. If a drummer missed a beat, he'd fire him mid-song, pocket the sticks, and keep time with boot heels. Producers booked dawn sessions because Shaver was calmest before high noon. By lunchtime, he'd rewritten half the record, demanded raw takes, and sworn the Holy Ghost preferred first-take imperfections echoing through every dusty honky-tonk. Johnny Paycheck could croon Velvet Heartache one moment and torch a bar the next. In 1985, he slugged a promoter for tweaking monitor volume, then months later pulled a pistol over tequila and served time. Managers devised military-style wake-up drills, 3 alarms, 2 bodyguards, and a decoy hotel, all to shepherd him onto the bus. Even when present, he'd vanish mid-solo, returning breathless, hair soaked in mystery sweat. Stagehands kept spare fringe jackets because the original would be drenched before song 3. When reporters asked about the turmoil, Paycheck blamed cosmic pressures and swore he'd quit booze tomorrow. Tomorrow rarely came, but the instant that soaring tenor sliced cigarette fog, crowds forgot every broken promise. Backline techs placed friendly bets on whether he'd survive through the encore. Waylon Jennings treated studio etiquette like a borrowed horse, meant to be broken. If a producer requested overdubs, Jennings cranked the monitors until the faders rattled and recut the track his way. At one festival, he barricaded himself in the dressing room for hours because the printed set list didn't match his scribbles. He finally emerged, shredded the papers like confetti, kicked the mic stand into the crowd, and launched into a roaring medley nobody rehearsed. Bandmates read his mood like weather. A sideways glare meant transpose instantly or get flattened. Still, beneath the growl was an outlaw work ethic. Once the right take happened, he'd sit all night comping solos for friends, then slip away at sunrise, leaving a note. Rules are for people without feel. Hank Williams Sr. was country music's first ghost, appearing, vanishing, reappearing with a hollow grin and pockets full of pills. Promoters printed posters but crossed their fingers. Sometimes Hank rolled up late in a taxi, sometimes not at all. When he did appear, the steel guitar intro often outlasted the audience's patience as stagehands searched parking lots, hoping to drag him inside. Damp from rain and whiskey, He would stride to the mic and deliver Your Cheatin' Heart, so aching that husbands hid tears behind programs. The problem was never the song, only the silence afterward, when he slipped away with a cabbie sworn to secrecy. Payroll clerks began issuing partial refunds in advance, and yet ticket lines kept growing. Proof that the chance to witness genius outshined any guarantee. George No-Show Jones earned the nickname Honestly. One morning, Tammy Wynette hid every ignition key hoping to keep him home. He rode a lawnmower 8 miles to the nearest bar anyway. Venues started hiring emergency openers and printing "subject to change" on tickets. If Jones did arrive, rehearsal was moot. He might swap keys mid-verse because the heartbreak felt deeper a half-step lower. Tour accountants carried aspirin for themselves and crisp bills for refunds, yet when that mournful baritone finally wrapped itself around "He stopped loving her today," even bartenders went silent. Jones later joked that punctuality was for bankers, not balladeers. Fans agreed, proving country audiences would rather endure anxiety than miss the possibility of hearing the possum pour sorrow straight from the source. Glenn Campbell's grin sparkled brighter than his cherry-red Telecaster, masking a private storm of fading memory and lingering vice. During one marathon session, he stared at his fingers, confused by a progression he'd played 1,000 times, then reclaimed it with a solo so fluid engineers forgot to breathe. Producers installed lyric monitors when early dementia whispered, but Campbell hated the safety net. Nightly binges with Coke and tequila frayed his pitch, so engineers patched a hidden Glenn button to polish rough edges. He found out, yanked cables, and barked that honesty needed no disguise. Minutes later, he retracked the part raw, trembling yet true, and the playback left hardened studio veterans wiping tears they pretended were sweat. Willie Nelson lives on Willie time, a dimension where clocks melt like dolly paintings under neon bar signs. Sound check at 3? He drifts in around 6, trigger slung low, braids smelling of cedar smoke and fresh cannabis. The band barely shrugs, confrontation only delays things further. Once a furious promoter pounded his dressing room door. Willie opened it, handed over a signed rolling paper packet, suggested the man try perspective, then resumed tuning. 2 hours later, the first chord rang out, crowd delirious, lateness forgiven. Nelson insists good vibes season music the way oak seasons whiskey, and rushing spoils the batch. Tour buses therefore idle endlessly outside Texas truck stops, while Willie scribbles lyrics on napkins, blissfully unaware that accountants are grinding teeth behind tinted windows. Jerry Lee Lewis treated restraint as a medical condition he never caught. During one infamous session, he slammed a 38 on the piano lid to settle a tempo dispute, tapping the barrel in time, while the drummer's hands shook. Another night, he drenched the keys in lighter fluid, promising a bonfire if the engineer didn't crank the slapback echo. Label executives sprinted from their homes in pajamas to prevent catastrophe. Lewis chuckled, flicked the match aside, and pounded great balls of fire so ferociously the piano legs inched across the floor. Afterward, he demanded a gospel hymn to balance the moral books, leaving musicians unsure whether to kneel or run. With Jerry Lee, salvation and danger occupied the same chord, and nobody present ever forgot the electricity of that collision. Tanya Tucker signed her first deal before she could legally drive, and spent the next decade proving teenage rebellion had nothing on her. Hotel chairs flew, mini bars evaporated, and one backstage curtain allegedly became a cape for her impromptu hallway rodeo. Rehearsals were optional. Tanya preferred to feel the room live, even if that meant changing the key 3 beats into the opener. Promoters doubled security, not for rowdy fans, but for fragile equipment. When a veteran guitarist politely asked for setlist consistency, Tucker ripped the paper in half, winked, and said, "Now you've got choices." Yet despite the wreckage, every show ended with fans roaring for encores, proof that charisma can outshine chaos. Managers just kept credit cards on standby for inevitable repair invoices. Merle Haggard's barbed wire dignity made lesser professionals wilt. He once paused a live television broadcast to berate a bassist whose groove he deemed limper than week-old lettuce, firing the man on camera and finishing the song solo. Journalists hoping for heartwarming anecdotes instead found Haggard dissecting their questions as if peeling bad onions. He canceled an entire album when the drummer's swing felt microscopic syllables off. Columbia panicked. Merle calmly went fishing, claiming trout taught better timing than metronomes. His standards forged masterpieces, but crew turnover resembled a battlefield evacuation. Still, musicians lined up for the privilege of one perfect take under the hag's blistering stare, knowing the legend could cut through mediocrity and egos, like a prison chisel through soft pine. Perfection was his parole condition. Charlie Rich wore a voice smooth as Tennessee cream, yet his temper burned 100 proof. When the CMA crowned John Denver in 1975, Rich, already sipping bourbon, struck a match to the winner's envelope on live television, grinning as flame curled the edges. The network cut to commercials. Backstage, executives threatened lifetime bans. Rich shrugged, called it performance art, and wandered off in search of another bottle. Studio insiders knew similar fireworks. One arranger suggested strings. Rich slammed the piano lid so loudly the sustain pedal snapped. He insisted music be felt, not orchestrated, and found sabotage an acceptable editorial note. After each implosion, he'd return the next morning remorseful, lay down a velvet vocal, and leave producers admitting the mayhem somehow flavored the magic. Unpredictability sold records. Tammy Wynette stitched heartbreak into sound, but she could ice a control room with a single arched eyebrow. During a legendary Nashville session, the drummer inserted an extra crash cymbal accent. Tammy stopped singing, fixed him with a stare, and calmly requested silence until everyone remembered whose name sold the records. The standoff lasted an hour, coffee pots emptied, engineers sweated. When she resumed, the take was flawless, and the cymbal forever exiled. Label executives tried nudging her towards slicker pop. She composed "Stand By Your Man" in reply, a melodic knuckle sandwich that became an anthem. She demanded separate reverb chambers for her high notes, and once refused to continue until fresh roses replaced wilted bouquets. Polite but immovable, Tammy proved steely resolve can wear rhinestones. Reba McEntire smiles bright enough to light an arena, but backstage, she runs it like mission control. Before sound check, she walks each seat bank, jotting sightline issues in a leather notebook. Miss a spotlight cue and expect a debrief complete with time code and suggested remedial drills. Some crew members cracked, many leveled up into lighting ninjas under her laser focus. Reba once halted rehearsals because the fog machine's swirl pattern obscured her fiddle section. She greeted the union rep with sweet tea before demanding immediate fixes. Turnover happens, yet the tour's precision wins awards yearly. McEntire calls it respect for the ticket buyer, but skeptics whisper the word perfectionist. Either way, guests leave convinced that behind every lush ballad is a redhead counting beats, beams, and breathing rooms. Linda Ronstadt could silence a room with one sustained note, yet she'd freeze production over something as mundane as lighting color temperature. During the making of Simple Dreams, she arrived, scanned the fluorescent glare, declared it surgical, and sent everyone home until warm tungsten lamps appeared. The week's delay cost thousands, but Linda argued mood shaped mouth shape, and mouth shape shaped resonance. When critics sniffed diva, she invited them to sing under hospital bulbs and get back to her. Engineers grumbled until playback. The first take under new lights shimmered like moonlit water. Ronstadt then baked brownies for the crew, thanking them for patience. By morning, nobody remembered the expense, only the goosebumps. Perfection for Linda required ambience tuned as carefully as any guitar string. Porter Wagoner's rhinestone suits sparkled like carnival rides, and he controlled his stage with equal flash. As Dolly Parton's spotlight brightened, Porter tightened reins, rewriting harmonies minutes before airtime and tweaking Dolly's mic volume mid-verse to keep himself on top. Band members likened rehearsals to chess matches where Porter moved pieces others didn't know existed. When Parton finally announced departure, Wagoner filed lawsuits claiming creative ownership of her very voice. Yet audiences adored their combustible duets, unaware of court orders simmering beneath the smiles. In studio, Porter's ear was impeccable. He'd detect a stray overtone and halt the tape. Trouble brewed only when ego eclipsed tone, and those shining suits became mirrors reflecting every envy stitched into the seams. Lawyers bought season tickets to the circus. Loretta Lynn swung a lyrical pickaxe at double standards and kept swinging off stage. During a session, one executive snickered that birth control lyrics were unladylike. Loretta calmly placed her guitar on its stand, folded arms, and announced she would not sing another note until he apologized in front of every person present, including the janitor. 20 tense minutes later, the apology was delivered. The take that followed rocketed up the charts. Lynn's ferocity wasn't loud, just unbreakable. She toured with her kids in tow, cooked soup for the band, and still found time to confront radio programmers who censored her. Asked why she fought so hard, Loretta said the mountains taught her, if a rock blocks the path, swing harder. And swing she did, with perfect rhythm. Patsy Cline's cannonball voice flattened skeptics, but her insistence on precision flattened egos. She once stopped a full orchestra, marched to a backup singer, and sang his off-key note directly into his face until he matched it. Producers murmured about decorum. Patsy retorted that audiences paid for excellence, not excuses. Equal pay and top billing were non-negotiable, radical stances for a female star in 1960. When a venue refused to put her name above a male opener, she canceled, bought a local radio slot, and performed live over the air instead. The crowd left the auditorium and gathered around car speakers to listen. That night, the promoter learned a truth still etched in Music Row legend. Underestimate Patsy Cline at your peril. Absolutely to your peril. Conway Twitty crooned the tenderest love ballads ever pressed to vinyl, yet backstage he maintained a fortress of icy distance. Crew members joked he checked emotion at wardrobe alongside his sequined ties. He rarely mingled with stagehands, instead pacing alone and rehearsing subtle vocal runs nobody would notice but him. If rehearsals ran long, he'd walk out without a word, leaving musicians staring at a still swinging door. Producers who suggested lyrical edits met a silent stare, then found rewritten charts slid under their hotel doors by dawn. Twitty insisted the audience see only polished affection. The machinery behind it could run or rust, he didn't care. Yet the moment house lights dimmed, he delivered silk-smooth promises that made thousands believe he'd written each line just for them. Chris Christopherson floated through Music Row like a denim-clad meteor, leaving sparks and confusion. Managers scheduled co-writing appointments. Chris skipped them to land a helicopter on Johnny Cash's lawn, emerging with new songs scribbled on beer cartons. A label once discovered his completed album only when test pressings arrived unannounced, mastered and sequenced. The suits fumed, DJs cheered, and Christopherson shrugged that good art traveled faster than memos. While others fretted over chart positions, he disappeared to shrimp boats, returning sunburned with verses that rewired country poetry. Producers learned to mic everything when he walked in because the first run-through might be the only take before he vanished again. Genius, in his case, respected inspiration's clock and nobody else's, least of all a corporate day planner. So what does difficult mean in a town built on hurtin' songs? The same volatility that scorches friendships can fuse unforgettable art. Every bullet hole, shredded set list, and late arrival leaked raw voltage onto magnetic tape, still humming whenever the needle drops. If tonight's jolt hit home, tap like, hitch your wagon, and tell us which legend shocked you most. Some call the chaos tragic. Others swear it's the secret ingredient Nashville slips between the grooves, the crackle you feel in the dark. Either way, the songs keep spinning and the stories grow. Next round, we'll chase the managers who quit mid-tour and the drummers who dodged flying bottles. Until then, keep your ears open and your exits marked, because in country music, the line between magic and mayhem is only ever one missed cue away.